I now want to look at the dossier. Sir John, earlier you just mentioned, when we had been talking about patchy and sporadic, the chairman suggested that we talk about it at this point. So over to you.
Well, of course there has been a lot of focus on those references in the assessments that were done up until, say, August, I think, 2002 and, to a limited extent, the 9th of September assessment. That was the language used, and in my own testimony back in December, there were specific statements from me as to how, at each stage of the assessment process, the intelligence was described. I would just like to make one or two additional points. The first is that it's not at all unusual for an intelligence base behind judgments to be limited or described as sporadic and patchy. Obviously there's a risk here that acquires a sort of prominence as a point which belies another aspect, which is the fact that by the time we got to September in particular, we had talked about the importance of the change in judgments that took place then and the nature of the intelligence that was coming through, and of course that intelligence was judged against a set of standing judgments from the past which I'd been at pains to point out were already quite strong, and this is alongside the references to sporadic and patchy. But if you look at what was said in the underlying conclusions, for example, in March 2002, there was a clear statement about, I have got it in front of me somewhere, it is clear that Iraq is pursuing its programs and pushing wherever it can. So already there was quite a firm judgment that in a sense we had inherited, and then we continued to have, and then that became a firm view of the J.I.C. in September 2002, explicitly so, and that was what was presented to ministers, as we have already described. There wasn't a disagreement with it. It was something which reflected undoubtedly the view of the British intelligence community. That was what was presented to ministers and the Prime Minister, and in the assessments and updates and other documents which were issued after September, I don't think there's any reference to caveating, if you like, or references to the intelligence as limited. The intelligence is sporadic and patchy, and that's because we didn't think it was. We thought there was a sound intelligence base, and we had a firm judgment. That's the point I want to make.